Another week, another list. What are comic collectors buying right now? Let's find out. Welcome back to another video. This really popped when I saw it. That to me is a monster increase. Again, this book got hot. This book is ready to go higher.
So let's jump right into it.
We are back today with another statue review from Diamond Select Toys. Without further ado, let's get into the review. What is good, YouTube? This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics and Collectibles, and thank you for joining me for another video here on the channel. Of course, today is our favorite day of the week. It is the Hot 10 Comics of the Week breakdown. If you guys aren't familiar with this one, I take the 10 hottest comics according to the Key Collector app, and I break them down for you guys, letting you know which I'm buying, of course, which I'm staying away from. But before we get started in the video, like always, I want to remind you guys, if you're not a current sub of the channel, do me a favor, hit that sub button for me, smash that like button. You guys know once we get to 7,000 subs, I'm giving away a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 16. With that said, check out all the new merch on the channel in the links below. Enough said, let's get into this week's breakdown. Starting off the list is a massive pre-code horror key. It is a copy of Crime Suspense Stories number 22 and this classic cover by the great Johnny Craig and a CGC 7.5 just sold last week for an insane $19,800, up a whopping 104% since 2021. Then we had a CGC 5.0 sale of a crazy $9,000, up 3% since June. Now you guys know I'm not a huge pre-code horror fan, but there are about 5 to 10 of them which I absolutely love the covers, and if you're a big pre-code horror fan, they're must-owns. This is one of them on that list. Like I said before though, I'm not a huge pre-code horror guy. I love some of the covers, but I can't drop $20K on a high-grade copy of this one. I just can't do it. Low grade, hey, if you want it, I'm all for it. Other than that, I'm probably staying away. Coming in at the 9th spot this week is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 28 and the first appearance and origin of the Molten Man, and a CGC 8.5 just sold last week for a crazy $3,250, up 2% over the average. Then we had a CGC 5.0 sale of $336, up 20% over the average. And I gotta ask you, who's paying $3,000 for a high grade copy of this one? I know the black cover makes it super hard to get in high grade, but I mean, come on, $3,000 for this book? That's crazy. I think I picked my book up for around $120 a couple of years ago. That's what I'd be spending the money on this book. Spending $2,000, $3,000, hell, even $1,000 I think is insanity. Coming in at number 8 is a book I've actually never heard of before. It is a copy of Fantasy Quarterly number 1 and the first appearance of ElfQuest. There is an ElfQuest animated series in development over at Fox right now. That is why this book is on this list. And we just had a CGC 9.8 sell last week for $2,395, up 25% over the average. Who knew that ElfQuest was this hot? Then we had a CGC 9.6 sale of $575, up 2% over the average. I gotta ask you guys, are you spending $2,400 on a 9.8, or hell, even $500 and change on a 9.6? I've never even heard of ElfQuest, but maybe it's just me. Either way, it's a no-go. I can't spend this kind of money on this book right here, right now. Falling to number 7 this week is a copy of Incredible Hulk number 180 and the first cameo appearance of Wolverine. This is also the second appearance of the Wendigo, and we just had a CGC 8.5 sell last week for $1,750, up 36% over the average. Man, that's a huge jump. Then we had a CGC 4.5 sale of $575, up 8% over the average. Again, you guys know there's about 6 Bronze Age books I really want to own. This is probably one of them, although it's at the 6th spot, I would think, because it's the first cameo of Wolverine. Either way, in high grades, I just cannot spend the money that this book is going for, because I'm going to take that money and go buy a Hulk 181. That is the better buy. However, I'll say this, in low to mid grades, if you don't want to go out and spend the money that a 181 is going for, I still think the 180 is quite affordable. So if you're a Wolverine fan, it's definitely a must-own book, but I'd stick to the mid to low grades just to have the book in the collection, but that's just me. At number 6 this week is some Silver Age goodness. It is a copy of XMen number 14 and the first appearance of the Sentinels, machines that were invented to hunt down mutants. And we just had a CGC 8.0 sell last week for $1,170, up 5% over the average. Then we had a CGC 6.0 sale of $495, up 2% over the average. You guys tell me, are you going to spend $1,200 on an 8.0 copy of this book? Or are you going to take that $1,100 and put it towards a bigger key? That's what I'd be doing. But hey, if you're a big X-Men fan, you probably want to own this book, but I'd stick to mid-grade, spend $500, get a nice solid copy. No reason to spend $1,200 on this one, guys. At the 5 spot on this list is a copy of Transformers #1 and the first appearance of the Autobots and the Decepticons. And we just had a CGC 9.8 sale again this week for $1,480, up 5% over the average. You guys know I'm not a huge believer in some of these Copper Age books, especially at these high prices. Again, if you just want to own the book, you want to pay $100, $150 just to own it. Other than that, I don't want to spend the crazy amount of money that these books are going for. Speaking of copper and the 1980s, at number 4 is a copy of G.I. Joe #1 and the first appearance of Team G.I. Joe. And we just had a CGC 9.8 sell last week for $860, up 5% over the average. Now, while this price is getting better at a 9.8 as this book falls, I still don't want to spend anywhere near $900 to own a copy of G.I. Joe #1. Why? Probably because this book came out in the early 1980s, and I can't see spending that kind of money on a book that is not that old. Hey, I'm a G.I. Joe fan. I grew up in the 1980s loving Transformers, G.I. Joe, Thundercats, and He-Man. But I still can't do it, guys. It's way too much money to spend on this book. I remember in 2020, when mass hysteria was hitting, you could have had this book for around $150. That's really what I'm looking to spend on this book. No higher than that. It is just not worth it to me. You want to talk about a book that is worth it to me? At number 3 this week is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #50, the Trifecta, and the first appearance of the Kingpin, an iconic cover by the great John Romita Sr., and the classic storyline Spider-Man No More. And we just had a CGC 5.5 just sell last week for $1,100, up 18% over the average. Then we had a lowly CGC 4.5 mid-grade copy sell for only $651, up 4% over the average. You guys know this is one of my favorite books in my collection and out there in comics. I know there's a lot of copies out there of this book, still in the raw form as well, but because it is such an iconic book, I will always be a buyer, and it is still, in my opinion, undervalued. But hey, I'm a Spidey guy, and if you're not, you probably don't want to own it, but you know I am, so I'm always buying this book. Making its way to the 2 spot this week is a copy of Star Wars #1 and the first appearance of most of the OG Star Wars characters. And we just had a CGC 9.4 sell last week for $639, up 15% over the average. Then we had a CGC 8.0 sale of $295, up 14% over the average. We all know this book has been on the list for 3 freaking years already. I know there's a lot of Star Wars fans out there, but come on, do you not own your copy already? I can't see why anyone is going to spend all this money on this book. Yes, if you're a Star Wars fan, it is a must own, but if you're not, please stop buying this book. I'm tired of talking about it. And at the top spot this week, a new #1, who could have thunk it? It is a copy of Thundercats #1 and the first team appearance of the Thundercats, Lion-O, Cheetara, Panthro, Tigra, Wily Cat, Wily Kit, and of course our favorite, Snarf. And we just had a CGC 9.8 sell last week for $601, up 8% over the average. Now you guys know why this book is on this list. Thundercats Hysteria has returned because in 2 weeks we're getting a new Thundercats issue by Dynamite Comics, and I can't wait for it. But the one thing I'm going to say to you is this: there are so many copies of the book out there already, around about 1,000 variant covers to speak of. So it's not an investment book, and neither is Thundercats #1. Just an awesome book that if you want to own, go out and get it. It's not that bad at a 9.8 for $600. I'm a huge Thundercats fan, but I still don't want to spend the money on this book to own it. It is just not worth it. I hope you guys enjoy the list. I don't know about you, but I am ready for some new books to finally appear on this one. I'm getting tired of talking about the same shit every week. Regardless, if you know me, you know what I'm picking as the best buy of the week, and it is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #50, the Trifecta, one of my favorite books of all time. Every time I see it, I want to buy it. On a live show at my LCS, I always inquire about it. I love the cover, I love the story, and I love fucking Spider-Man. With that said, I hope you guys enjoy the video. This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics and Collectibles saying thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon.